World Book Day gives us a wonderful opportunity as human beings to celebrate the truly unique gift that the world of fiction, of written words, novels, biographies, reference, textbooks, so many different kinds of written word, how valuable they are to us in so many ways. We celebrate through characters in fiction, but also the widespread of the written word is something we should also contemplate. Think about biographies, the story of other people's lives. Autobiography, the story of our own life. Sometimes they can be merged together in a novel, say a novel which is something that's made up, created, fiction. Charles Dickens, who we use as the frontispiece for our advertisement for World Book Day this Friday, said that his favourite child, in other words his favourite novel, was David Copperfield. It was, in a way, an autobiography. It's about Charles Dickens as well as David Copperfield, about the troubles, the difficult childhood he had. It starts off by saying, I was born, whether I shall turn out to be the hero of these pages, only time will tell. These pages will, in the end, reveal the secret. And that telling of an autobiography is something that goes through the whole book. It's called David Copperfield, D.C., written by Charles Dickens, C.D. It was a kind of secret code for an autobiography, and it's a wonderful read. Words, the magic of words, the fun of words, the excitement of putting words together, these are part of what a poet does. ESM has been tremendously lucky to have A.F. Harrold with us over the last week or 10 days, only a couple of weeks ago. He gave a tremendous demonstration to us of the sheer potency of words, the fun of it, the excitement, the magic he can create as a performance artist, not least as an actor, but also as someone who, seemingly without any trouble, can create whole pictures, whole buildings of words, unexpected pictures and buildings in a way that are both entrancing, sometimes moving, often very funny. So we think of him today as we think of books generally, and I hope everyone will have time to think of the huge contribution the world of written statements, the world of books, the world of fiction, the world of poetry can still offer us in this modern world this Friday at World Book Day.
Hello, I'm A.F. Harrold. I'm an English author and poet who writes for magnificent young people all over the world. I write poetry books and storybooks, so I do it all. And I stand up in front of people and say my poems out loud. I'm very, very clever. So when I was at school, I used to get the sort of school reports that said, he's very smart, but he could actually do something if he tried. I was a bit lazy and a bit odd. I didn't particularly enjoy school. I didn't particularly enjoy the other kids. I preferred reading books. I preferred going and sitting in the library and reading books. That was what I liked to do at school. School stories. I didn't like sport. I liked books. My school life was really boring. After I left school, I grew a big beard and then became much more interesting. So if you're finding school isn't amazingly exciting, just think one day you'll get out and be able to grow a big beard. So there's always hope. Now, when I was at secondary school, what you call middle school at ESM, I had an English teacher called Mrs. Coates, C-O-A-T-E-S, Coates. And she taught me for 4 years out of the 5 years of secondary school. And she was brilliant. I was reading a lot of J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. I was reading fighting fantasy books, which are choose your own adventure books. I was reading lots of these, and she saw that I read these and saw that I was reading poetry books, and she would recommend me books and give me books that weren't school books, that weren't on the curriculum, were just books that she thought a bright kid like me might enjoy. And I would take those home and read them. And so she was hugely encouraging and hugely influential. And I think because she was an English teacher, sharing her love of literature with me, that really helped to set me on the path to becoming that sort of person, a person who loves literature, who loves books and stories and poems myself. Without her, with a different teacher in that place who was like, do this, do that, I can't imagine I would have ended up like this. So brilliant teachers are worth their weight in gold. And if you've got one, treasure them and bring them sweets on a Monday morning. My favourite author. Favourite author is a difficult question, because being an author, I know lots of authors, and I couldn't pick one and say, because the others would get jealous. So I'm going to give you a couple of names. When I was younger, when I was growing up, there was an author I still love very much, a man called Raymond Briggs. And Raymond Briggs, you might not know the name, but you'll know some of the books, I'm sure. He did picture books, storybooks. He did a book called The Snowman, which didn't have any words in, was just pictures, and it's become very popular. They made a film of it and things. He did a book called Fungus the Bogeyman, about a green, horrible, bogey, grumbly man. He did a book about Father Christmas, and Father Christmas going on holiday. These wonderful picture books that look like they're for younger kids, but there's so much depth and heart and strangeness in them that they are wonderful. And then every now and then he did these really serious grown-up picture books. He did a book called When the Wind Blows, and I grew up during the Cold War, when my country, England, was opposed to Russia and the USSR as it was then, and there was the threat of nuclear war all the time. We grew up with this in the 1980s, with the idea that the world could blow up. Some nutter presses a button, sends some missiles flying, and you all die in Asia, near the US, we all die in Europe, in America. We grew up with that. And Raymond Briggs did a magnificent book called When the Wind Blows, about perfectly ordinary people, a lovely old couple, Hilda and, I forget his name, Jim and Hilda, living through and surviving to the other side of this. And it's the most sad, heartbreaking, terrifying book that is made to look exactly like a kid's book, a little kid's book, but it's so serious, genius, Raymond Briggs. People writing today, contemporary children's authors, I love people like Robin Stevens. She's a fantastic author who writes a series of books, a series of murder mystery books about a couple of girls in boarding school in the 1930s. The Murder Most Unladylike. You'd love those if you enjoy things like that. Philip Reeve wrote a series of books called Mortal Engines, about giant cities on the back of sort of tractors that drive across the wasteland of Europe and Asia in the future after some terrible devastation. Brilliant adventures. So there you go. There's a couple of picks for you. So, one of the stories I've written, the book called The Imaginary, is about a real girl, a girl called Amanda, and her best friend, who's an imaginary friend called Roger. And they hang about together. They play games in the garden, in the house, sort of imagined worlds that Amanda dreams up. They have all sorts of adventures there. One day they have an argument, and Amanda gets knocked down by a car. And Roger is left by the side of the road after Amanda has been taken away in an ambulance. He doesn't know if she's alive or if she's dead, and he's like, what do I do now? And what do you think is going to happen to an imaginary friend when their real friend isn't there? He begins to fade away. He begins to see through himself and sort of turn to smoke and drift off And just before he vanishes entirely, before he dies, essentially, he gets found by a cat who's wandering by, because cats can see things. Cats can see ghosts and spirits and imaginary friends. And this cat called Zinzan, who I keep a picture of him on one of my badges here. Zinzan takes Roger to a place where imaginary friends can live in between having real friends, into the library, where there's enough imagination just sort of leaking out of all the books in the library to keep them going while they look for a new friend to believe in them. And while he's there, Roger learns that Amanda isn't dead. Thank goodness, she's not dead. She's in the hospital. And he thinks, I need to get back to her in the hospital because she's my best friend in the entire world. But he needs to find people to believe in him along the way, or he'll fade away before he gets there. It's so far off. And while he's trying to do this, trying to get to Amanda, he is being hunted by a man called Mr. Bunting, who wants to eat him. Because Mr. Bunting eats imaginary friends. I'm not going to go into why and all the explanations of that, but this is Roger's adventure, to try to get to Amanda without being caught and eaten by Mr. Bunting. And it's an exciting book. It's an adventure book. It's an adventure story, but it's also a book about remembering and about loss and about friendship and about love and all these sort of things hidden away inside this exciting story. And the exciting thing about it for me is, well, a couple of things. One is my most popular book. It's been translated into all sorts of languages around the world, into Japanese and Korean and Vietnamese and Russian and Greek and French and German, all sorts of languages I can't write and I can't read. Somebody else has taken my story and turned it into these books in these other countries. Amazing. And a few years ago, a man in Japan bumped into the book in his local bookshop and picked it up and looked at it and thought, that looks interesting. And he happened to work for a film company in Japan called Studio Ponok. And they've just made an animated movie of the imaginary that will be coming to Netflix later this year. Keep your eyes out for that. So that's amazingly exciting. My story going from a book to a film all around the world. Wow. So some authors have famous habits. Roald Dahl had a shed in his garden. He'd sit in his armchair, a writing board across his desk, 6 yellow pencils sharpened, and he'd write in pencil by hand on these bits of paper. And when he'd worked through 6 pencils, they'd all got blunt. That was him done for the afternoon. I'm less structured in my writing. I don't have that sort of habit that I have to be there. Partly because I write poems as well. A poem, I've always got my notebook with me when I'm sitting on a train, or if I'm sitting in the library waiting for some students to come. I've got 5 minutes. I might make a note of an idea in here, and I just jot them down. And then later on, when I get home, I've got a shed at the end of my garden, a little bit like Roald Dahl, but a modern office at the end of my garden, and my computer's there. I go sit in my computer, in front of my computer. I'll get my notebook out, and I'll put it like this, and I'll read what the notes I wrote, and I'll type them up, and I'll make changes. So these become poems when I do this at my computer. When I'm writing a story, a book, a long novel sort of story, then I really like to get up very early in the morning, maybe 5 o'clock in the morning, and go to my shed and sit down and do some writing. Maybe an hour's writing, maybe an hour and a half, something like that, before I do things like look at my emails, check my social media, look at the news websites. Before I do any of that, before my brain has got muddled up with real world stuff, I sit down, think about where I was yesterday in the story, and carry on from there. And if I do that at the start of the day while my brain is still clear and pure and empty, just the last bits of the dreams from the night before in there, then I can get my stories going. if I don't do that first thing, if instead I have a cup of tea and I read the newspaper and I check my Instagram or whatever, I find it really hard to then get into the space where I can write. And so because I do that at like 5 in the morning, I write my books in the summer when the sun's come up at 5, because I'm not getting up in the dark and going to the end of my garden and doing that. I didn't become a poet in order to have to get up very early in the morning when it's dark and cold and rainy. So I write my stories in the summer. I write my poems all over the year. So there we go. There's some tips and insights into A.F. Harrold and his writing techniques. Of course I can. Yeah, I've got a book here called Things You Find in a Poet's Beard. And this is the poet, and this is the beard, and this is a thing. A finger, there we go. So here is a poem from this book. And this poem is called A Poem About a Dog Having a Bath. And this is about that dog that you might take out for a walk in the afternoon. It jumps in the mucky pond and it rolls in the mud and in the hedge and in the fox poo, and you bring it home and it's muddy and mucky, and what do you have to do? You have to give it a bath or a shower or a wash. So this is that poem. The dog in the bathroom is starting to bark. He spent the afternoon playing games in the park, chasing every stick and every thrown ball, and rolling in the puddles with the big and the small. When it started raining and the mud splashed up, he started rolling around like an excitable pup who never seen a muddy, mucky bit of ground before. He got as dirty as a dog can get. And then he got more. So now we come home, we're indoors in the dry, and up in the bathroom Mum, he begins to cry as Mum attempts to clean the caked mud and the twigs and the grit, and she goes scrub, scrub, scrub. But he makes an awful fuss and he makes an awful row, and it's woof, bark, bark, yelp, grr, yelp, growl. It's bark, yelp, woof, grunt, growl, bark, howl, 'cause she's got soap in his eyes. And he can't reach the towel because he's a dog and his arms are not long. And with paws instead of hands, well, he couldn't hold on to the towel anyway. As he barks and he cries, as any dog would who got soap in their eyes. But he'll get his own back on Mum in a minute. When it's time to dry him off, well, she tries to begin it by rubbing him dry, but he makes a quick break and runs into her bedroom for a good old shake. There you go. Yeah, no, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because we all have days when we feel down, when we feel glum, when things haven't gone right for us. When your work hasn't come out right, or when the dinner you were expecting turns out to be horrible, when your friend who you expected to see, they're not here, or you overhear them say something a bit gossipy to someone else. There's all sorts of reasons why we end up feeling down and feeling glum. And when I have a day like that, what I like to do is, there are a few things. One, eat some chocolate. Two, have a bath. I do a lot of reading in the bath. I read my books in the bath. So it's just away from everybody else. Nobody else is going to come into the bathroom while you're there in your bubbles reading your book. It's a bit of alone time, a bit of me time. It's warm, it's soapy, it smells nice. You know, that's nice. This might not be practical. I like to go for a walk. I've got some nice countryside near where I live in England, so I can go for a walk and see nature and see ducks and swans and birds, and that just helps lift you up as well. So those are some advice. Read some funny poems. Watch a funny cartoon on the telly. And remember, tomorrow will be a better day. You know, these things pass. It feels horrible while you're in there, but it will get better. But if you can eat some chocolate in the bath while reading a book, boom, that will help you feel better, probably. So I have been here visiting ESM for about a week here in, what is it? Where are we? March, April. It's now April 2024. Who'd have thought? And I've met loads of kids. I met loads of the junior kids. I met some of the seniors, some of the middle kids. I've seen loads of people wandering around. I've been into the preschool and met loads of the little tiny kids in the preschool. I've met some of the staff, and everywhere I've gone, all the people I've met have been so friendly, so welcoming. So, oh, come in, look at this, meet me, say hello. Mr. Ashley, the whole place has been such a warm and friendly place to me that I hope it feels that way to you as well. And if you are having a down day, there's somebody around here who will give you a hug or pat on the back or a fist bump, and just walking the corridors cheers me up here. So thank you for letting me come visit and being so nice to me. And all the kids who wrote some poems while they were with me, I hope you had some fun. Thank you. And everybody, grow big beards. That's oh, that's another thing. If you're feeling down, just stroke your beard. How could I forget that one? See, I feel better already.
Hello everyone, wishing everybody a fantastic book week at ESM. Have fun with Jack.